Does managing a never-ending pile of duplicate invoices have you feeling frustrated and overwhelmed? Well, you're not alone. The rise of suppliers sending multiple copies of the same invoice has become a top concern for those managing or working in the accounts payable process. This is a growing problem as more and more vendors seem to think that sending numerous copies of the same invoice is a good idea. In this broadcast, we share steps that any organization can take to reduce the number of these extra invoices that you're receiving, invoices that require extra work on the part of your already overworked accounts payable staff. Make sure to stick around until the end when we address the horrific but little spoken about issue that is making this problem even worse. Get ready to supercharge your accounts payable and payment expertise. I'm Mary Schaefer, founder of AP Now, your one-stop shop for cutting-edge business intelligence, whether you're working and managing or have responsibility for the accounts payable and payment functions. All righty, back to our duplicate copies of the same invoice. Step number one, set the stage. Provide precise instructions on where vendors should send invoices. This might include when you first start the relationship, be it in a welcome letter or a welcome package, or in your annual letter. Now, if you don't do either of these things, consider including a note when you send an email request for the W-9. Try and set them straight right at the beginning, right off the bat, so that there can be no misunderstanding. And when we talk about telling them where to send the invoices and, the centralized location, it should be one email address, one fax number, and one postal address. And that each of these should be very specific. So, for example, with email, you don't want them just sending it to any email. You want them sending it to an email address that's something like accounts payable at ABC Company or invoices at ABC Company. This way, if somebody's out or somebody leaves, you're not stuck with an issue where invoices are in an email account that you can't get into. And of course, your postal address should be very, very precise. Now, of course, you can also have a portal for your vendors to deliver invoices to you, and we need to mention that. Portals are a great way to handle this one particular problem. But, and this is a big but, we've seen that suppliers have shown reluctance to use them. And so organizations that have gone this route where the vendor has to actually deliver the invoices to the portal have seen less than ideal utilization. And so it creates problems on the other hand. So even though that would solve this one particular problem, I'm not going to recommend it as your only way to solve it because of all the other issues that are involved. Okay. Step number two to getting rid of these horrific duplicate copies of the same invoice. Pay on time, okay? And this doesn't give the reason for this is it doesn't give your supplier a legitimate reason for sending a second copy. If they don't get paid by the due date, they are well within their rights to send a second copy of that invoice in an attempt to try and get paid. So don't give them that opportunity. Pay on time. I'm not saying pay early, but I am saying if you've agreed to 30-day terms, pay them in 30 days. Don't decide, well, we'll try and get a few extra days and we'll pay them in 40 or 50 days. Because once you do that, they're going to send that second invoice, and that's more work for your staff. And that's going to negate some of the savings that you've got from your cash flow enhancement by paying a little bit late. Step number three, identify those vendors who regularly send you more than one copy. And by the way, you might also identify those vendors who not only are they sending you a second copy of that invoice, but they're changing the invoice number because that's going to require some extra checking. And that's another way that a duplicate payment can get made. But anyway, you're going to identify those vendors who are sending more than one copy. And then you contact them and ask them to stop. Some will, and unfortunately, some won't. Now, you can make this first attempt at asking, to only send one copy and telling them exactly where to send it by email. And, you'll be successful in some cases, but where you aren't, and it will happen, we have to go to step number 4. And that means actually picking up the phone and calling those who persist in sending multiple copies of the same invoice. Now, you're going to ask them politely because you want them to do what you're going to do. And again, just like before, some will and some won't. Now, to be honest, many of these companies who are sending multiple copies of the invoice, that is their process. So you calling them up and asking them to stop is not going to change anything, because that's their process, and they're not going to change it just for you. But you want to try. And if they persist, you might tell them that if they're going to continue sending all these extra copies of these invoices, that they're going to go on the list of vendors who require extra verification, because you have to protect your organization and you have to make sure that you don't make a duplicate payment. And you might tell them that, going on this list could delay their payment. And that goes right against what they're trying to achieve by sending those second copies. Okay. Now, step number 5, repeat step number 3 and number 4. Some vendors who do stop sending the duplicates will resume. That'll practice after a few months, and you'll have to get on them again. And then in other cases, you'll have new suppliers who come on board, and it will be their process to send multiple copies. So you want to also make sure that you stop them. Now, at the beginning of this talk, I promised that I would share with you a tactic that is in use. But before we get to that, I'd like to share with you that we tackle big accounts payable and payment issues on Tuesdays and Thursdays with new broadcasts on this channel. And on Saturday, well, we have a little bit of fun with Wordle. So please subscribe and give us a thumbs up to show your support and help us reach more professionals just like you. So what's this tactic that's being used? There are consultants who are now advising their clients to send a second copy of that invoice on the invoice date or a few days before the invoice date. They have some convoluted reasoning that they think this second invoice will remind their customers that the payment is due and will prompt a payment. Now, unfortunately, what this does is create extra work for you. And personally, although I can't prove this, I think that some of these companies who are sending these second copies at this last minute like this are hoping that you'll make a duplicate payment. Again, I have no proof of that. It's just my own personal opinion. Now, these duplicate copies of invoices are just one of several reasons that invoices get paid twice. There are several other reasons on top of this. We recently did a video on that topic, which you can watch right now using a link that will appear momentarily on YouTube on your screen and is in the show notes below. Kindly consider expressing your support for us by giving us a thumbs up, subscribing, sharing, or leaving a comment. Your actions are always appreciated.